The scorching Afghan sun beat down mercilessly on forward operating base Shank as Staff Sergeant Maria Santos carefully laid out the components of her M107 Barrett .50 caliber sniper rifle on the worn wooden table. The weapon, weighing nearly 30 pounds when fully assembled, was her lifeline in this hostile territory where Taliban fighters could emerge from the rocky terrain without warning. Admiral James Mitchell, a decorated Navy SEAL commander with 23 years of service, had arrived at the base earlier that morning for a routine inspection of special operations personnel. His reputation preceded him, a man who had led countless missions in Iraq, Somalia, and Afghanistan, earning 3 Bronze Stars and a Navy Cross for extraordinary heroism. At 52, his weathered face bore the scars of battle, and his steely gray eyes missed nothing. The Admiral had been skeptical when briefed about Santos, a 26-year-old Army sniper from East Los Angeles. She had joined the military straight out of high school, driven by a desire to escape the gang violence that had claimed her younger brother's life. Her commanding officers spoke of her with reverence, claiming she possessed an almost supernatural ability with long-range weapons. Mitchell had heard such claims before about young soldiers, and they rarely lived up to the hype. As he approached the outdoor firing range where Santos was preparing for her weekly weapons maintenance demonstration, Admiral Mitchell noticed something unusual about her technique. Unlike most soldiers who treated their rifles as mere tools, Santos handled each component with the delicacy of a surgeon and the precision of a master craftsman. Her small hands moved with practiced efficiency, field stripping the massive rifle in what appeared to be a choreographed dance. The Barrett M107, also known as the M82A1, is not a weapon for the faint of heart. Its .50 BMG rounds can penetrate concrete walls, disable vehicles, and eliminate targets at distances exceeding 2 miles. The rifle's brutal recoil has been known to dislocate shoulders and bruise ribs of inexperienced shooters. Yet Santos handled it as if it were an extension of her own body. "Sergeant Santos," Admiral Mitchell called out as he approached, his combat boots crunching on the gravel. "I'm Admiral Mitchell. I've heard interesting things about your marksmanship abilities." Santos immediately snapped to attention, her dark brown eyes meeting his with unwavering confidence. "Sir, yes, sir. Staff Sergeant Santos reporting for duty, sir." "At ease, Sergeant," Mitchell replied, his tone softening slightly. "I understand you hold the unofficial record for the longest confirmed kill shot in this sector." "Sir, I prefer not to discuss my confirmed kills in terms of records, sir," Santos responded diplomatically. "Each shot taken in defense of American lives is equally important, regardless of distance." Admiral Mitchell raised an eyebrow. Most snipers he knew were eager to boast about their achievements, especially the long-distance shots that separated elite marksmen from ordinary soldiers. Santos's humility was unexpected, and it intrigued him. The firing range at FOB Shank was rudimentary compared to the state-of-the-art facilities back home. Sandbags and wooden posts marked various distances, with the furthest target barely visible at 800 meters. Beyond that stretched an endless expanse of brown hills and rocky outcroppings where enemy fighters often positioned themselves for attacks on the base. "I'd like to observe your weapons maintenance routine," Admiral Mitchell said, pulling up a folding chair. "Carry on as you normally would." Santos nodded and returned her attention to the Barrett. She began by removing the bolt assembly, her movements fluid and economical. As she worked, she quietly explained each step, though the Admiral had not asked for a tutorial. "The bolt face requires daily cleaning in this environment, sir," she said, using a specialized brush to remove sand particles that could cause misfires. "The desert gets into everything, and a single grain of sand in the wrong place can mean the difference between a successful mission and catastrophic failure." Admiral Mitchell watched as Santos meticulously cleaned each component. Her technique was flawless, but what impressed him most was her obvious love for the weapon. She didn't treat it as a tool of war, but rather as a precision instrument that demanded respect and care. "How long have you been a sniper, Sergeant?" he asked. "3 years, sir. I completed sniper school at Fort Benning and have been deployed here for 18 months. She paused in her cleaning routine. "My grandfather taught me to shoot when I was 8 years old. He was a Marine sniper in Vietnam." "What's your longest confirmed kill?" Santos hesitated for a moment, her hands still working on the rifle's trigger assembly. 2,847 meters, sir. Taliban commander who was directing mortar fire on our convoy 3 months ago. Admiral Mitchell felt his skepticism waver. A shot at that distance was extraordinary even for the most experienced snipers. The world record for a confirmed sniper kill stood at 2,815 meters, set by a Canadian Special Forces sniper in 2017. If Santos was telling the truth, her shot would rank among the longest in military history. "That's quite a distance, Sergeant. What were the conditions?" "Crosswind of approximately 15 miles per hour from the southwest, temperature 94 degrees Fahrenheit, target elevation 400 feet above our position," she recited without hesitation. "I calculated a bullet flight time of 6.2 seconds and adjusted for Coriolis effect due to the extreme range." The technical precision of her answer impressed Admiral Mitchell. These weren't details a soldier would memorize unless the shot had been genuine and extraordinary. The Coriolis effect, the rotation of the Earth affecting bullet trajectory, only became a factor at extreme distances, and few snipers even considered it in their calculations. As Santos continued her maintenance routine, Admiral Mitchell found himself drawn into conversation with this remarkable young woman. She spoke with quiet intelligence about ballistics, wind patterns, and the psychological challenges of long-range shooting. Her knowledge was encyclopedic, far exceeding what he would expect from someone with only 3 years of experience. "My grandfather used to say that a sniper's greatest weapon isn't the rifle, it's patience," Santos said as she began reassembling the Barrett. "He taught me that you can have the best equipment in the world, but if you don't understand your environment and respect your target, you'll miss every time." The Admiral nodded appreciatively. "Wise man. Did he see combat in Vietnam?" "Yes, sir. He was with the 3rd Marine Regiment in Khe Sanh. He doesn't talk about it much, but he taught me that every shot has consequences that ripple far beyond the immediate target." Santos's voice carried a weight that seemed too heavy for her young shoulders. "He always said that taking a life, even in war, should never become easy." Admiral Mitchell studied Santos with new interest. In his experience, the best snipers possessed a unique combination of technical skill and emotional intelligence. They needed the precision to make impossible shots and the wisdom to know when not to take them. Santos seemed to embody both qualities. The maintenance demonstration continued for another hour, with Santos methodically cleaning and inspecting every component of her rifle. Admiral Mitchell was struck by her attention to detail and the obvious pride she took in her equipment. When she finished, the Barrett looked as pristine as if it had just left the factory. "Impressive work, Sergeant," he said as Santos secured the rifle in its carrying case. "I'd like to see you demonstrate your shooting abilities tomorrow. Can you arrange for some long-range targets?" "Sir, yes, sir. I can have targets set up at various distances up to 1,500 meters using the existing range facilities." Admiral Mitchell shook his head. "I'm not interested in standard range shooting, Sergeant. I want to see what you can do at the distances you claim to be effective at. Can you arrange for targets beyond 2,000 meters?" Santos considered this for a moment, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Sir, that would require going beyond the established firing range. I could set up a demonstration in the valley to the north, but it would need to be coordinated with the base security perimeter and air traffic control." "Make it happen," Admiral Mitchell ordered. "I want to see this legendary shooting ability for myself." As the Admiral walked away, Santos felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. She had never performed under such scrutiny from a senior officer, especially one with Admiral Mitchell's reputation. The pressure to prove herself was immense, but she had never backed down from a challenge. That evening, Santos sat on her bunk cleaning her personal sidearm and thinking about the next day's demonstration. Her fellow soldiers had gathered around, eager to hear about her encounter with the famous Admiral. "I heard he's seen more combat than half the generals in the Pentagon," said Corporal Rodriguez, her spotter and closest friend on the base. "If you impress him, it could open a lot of doors." Santos nodded absently, but her mind was elsewhere. She was thinking about her grandfather's lessons, about the weight of taking a life, and about the responsibility that came with exceptional skill. Tomorrow wasn't just about proving her abilities to Admiral Mitchell. It was about honoring the tradition of marksmanship that had been passed down to her. The next morning arrived with the usual cacophony of military life. Helicopters thundered overhead, diesel generators hummed constantly, and the ever-present sound of radio chatter filled the air. Santos had been awake since 0400 hours, unable to sleep due to nervous energy. She had spent the early morning hours studying weather patterns and calculating potential shooting solutions for various distances. Admiral Mitchell arrived at the improvised shooting position at 0800 hours sharp, accompanied by Colonel Peterson, the base commander, and several other senior officers who had heard about the unusual demonstration. Santos had already been there for 2 hours, setting up her equipment and coordinating with the range safety officers. The shooting position Santos had selected offered a clear view of the valley to the north, where she had arranged for human silhouette targets to be placed at distances of 1,500, 2,000, and 2,500 meters. Each target was marked with brightly colored panels to aid visibility, and radio operators were standing by to confirm hits. "Good morning, Sergeant," Admiral Mitchell said as he approached her position. "Are you ready for your demonstration?" "Sir, yes, sir. Conditions are optimal this morning. Wind is light and variable, temperature 78 degrees, clear visibility." Santos gestured toward the valley. "Targets are positioned at 1,500, 2,000, and 2,500 meters. Each has been surveyed for exact distance using laser rangefinders." Admiral Mitchell nodded and settled into a nearby observation position with his binoculars. The other officers spread out along the firing line, all eyes focused on the young sergeant who had claimed to possess extraordinary shooting abilities. Santos took her position behind the Barrett, adjusting the bipod legs for optimal stability. The rifle was equipped with a Leupold Mark IV scope, capable of magnifications up to 16 power. At extreme distances, even this high-quality optic would render targets as barely visible specks. "I'll begin with the 1,500-meter target for sight confirmation," Santos announced, her voice steady despite the pressure she felt. She chambered around, the metallic click echoing across the range. Through his binoculars, Admiral Mitchell could barely make out the distant target. At 1,500 meters, the human silhouette appeared as little more than a dark smudge against the tan hillside. He had seen accomplished snipers struggle with shots at this distance, and Santos was preparing to treat it as a warm-up. Santos controlled her breathing, slowing her heart rate, and entering the meditative state that her grandfather had taught her. The world around her faded away until there was nothing but the crosshairs, the target, and the subtle environmental factors that would affect her bullet's flight path. She squeezed the trigger with the steady pressure her training had ingrained as second nature. The Barrett erupted with its characteristic thunderous roar, the massive muzzle brake directing the blast sideways and creating a cloud of dust around the shooting position. The recoil, even absorbed by the rifle's sophisticated dampening system, was substantial. "Hit!" came the radio confirmation from the spotters near the target. "Center mass." Admiral Mitchell lowered his binoculars with a satisfied nod. The shot was impressive, but not extraordinary for a trained sniper. The real test would come with the longer distances. Santos chambered another round and adjusted her scope for the 2,000-meter target. At this distance, she would need to account for significant bullet drop, nearly 20 feet, and the increasing effects of wind drift and atmospheric conditions. "Target 2, 2,000 meters," she announced. The calculations flowed through her mind automatically. Muzzle velocity, ballistic coefficient, air density, wind speed, and direction. These were the mathematical foundations of long-range precision shooting. But Santos had progressed beyond mere calculation to an intuitive understanding of how her bullets would behave. She settled into her shooting position again, her body becoming perfectly still. Through the scope, the 2,000-meter target was barely visible, requiring her to use the maximum magnification and careful focus to distinguish it from the surrounding terrain. The second shot rang out across the valley, and all eyes strained to see the results. Several seconds passed before the radio crackled to life. Hit. Solid hit on target 2. Admiral Mitchell felt his skepticism beginning to crumble. A successful shot at 2,000 meters required exceptional skill, but Santos had made it look routine. She was already preparing for the final target at 2,500 meters, the distance that would truly test her extraordinary claims. At 2,500 meters, the target was invisible to the naked eye and appeared as the faintest suggestion of contrast through high-powered binoculars. For Santos, peering through her rifle scope, it required intense concentration to even locate the target against the very terrain of the valley. Final target, 2,500 meters, she announced. Her voice remained steady, but Admiral Mitchell could see the increased focus in her posture. This was the shot that would either validate her reputation or expose it as exaggeration. Santos made minute adjustments to her scope, calculating for a bullet drop of nearly 40 feet and a flight time approaching 5 seconds. At this distance, even the rotation of the Earth would slightly affect her bullet's path, a factor that most snipers never needed to consider. She controlled her breathing and heart rate, entering a state of almost supernatural calm. Her finger found the trigger, and she began the slow, steady pressure that would release the shot. The moment had to be perfect. Any tremor, any variation in technique would send the bullet wide of its mark. The Barrett roared for the third time, and Santos rode the recoil while keeping her eye to the scope. At this distance, she couldn't see the impact, but years of experience told her the shot had felt right. The bullet would take several seconds to reach the target, creating a tense silence across the range. Finally, the radio crackled. Hit. Direct hit on target 3. A murmur of amazement rippled through the gathered officers. Admiral Mitchell slowly lowered his binoculars. His expression transformed from skepticism to genuine awe. He had witnessed something truly extraordinary, shooting that ranked among the finest he had ever seen in his decades of military service. As Santos safed her weapon and began packing her equipment, Admiral Mitchell approached her position. The young sergeant stood at attention, but he could see the quiet pride in her eyes. "Outstanding shooting, Sergeant Santos," he said, his voice carrying a respect that hadn't been there the day before. "That was some of the finest marksmanship I've ever witnessed." "Thank you, sir. My grandfather would be proud." Admiral Mitchell nodded slowly, understanding now that Santos's humility wasn't false modesty, but rather the confidence that came from true mastery. She didn't need to boast about her abilities because they spoke for themselves. The demonstration had lasted less than an hour, but it had fundamentally changed Admiral Mitchell's perception of what was possible in the realm of military marksmanship. As he watched Santos carefully pack her rifle, he found himself wondering what other extraordinary individuals might be serving in obscurity, their talents unrecognized by the higher command structure. The story of Staff Sergeant Maria Santos was just beginning, and Admiral Mitchell suspected that this remarkable young woman would play a significant role in future operations. Her shooting skills were undeniable, but he sensed there was much more to discover about the quiet sniper from East Los Angeles who treated impossible shots as routine challenges. As the sun climbed higher over the Afghan desert, Admiral Mitchell knew he had witnessed something special, a demonstration of human potential that would influence his decisions for years to come. The legend of Maria Santos, the sniper who could hit targets beyond the horizon, was about to spread far beyond the boundaries of Forward Operating Base Shank 3 weeks after the remarkable shooting demonstration. Admiral Mitchell found himself in a secure briefing room at Bagram Airfield, surrounded by maps, satellite imagery, and classified intelligence reports. The mission parameters being discussed were unlike anything he had encountered in his distinguished career, a high-value target elimination that would require shooting skills beyond the capabilities of conventional military snipers. Intelligence sources had identified Hakim al-Rashid, a senior Taliban commander responsible for coordinating sophisticated IED attacks throughout the region. Al-Rashid had proven extraordinarily elusive, moving through remote mountain territories where conventional military operations were impractical. Recent intercepts had pinpointed his location to a fortified compound in the Hindu Kush Mountains, positioned in terrain so treacherous that standard assault tactics were impossible. The compound sat on a rocky outcropping at an elevation of 9,200 feet, surrounded by steep cliffs and accessible only by a narrow mountain path that Taliban fighters could defend indefinitely. Satellite reconnaissance revealed that al-Rashid made brief appearances on an observation balcony each morning at dawn, scanning the valley below through binoculars before retreating into the heavily fortified structure. General Harrison, the regional commander, had convened a meeting to explore unconventional solutions to what appeared to be an impossible tactical problem. Special operations teams had studied the target for months without developing a viable assault plan. The compound's position made it virtually impregnable to ground forces, while airstrikes would likely result in significant collateral damage to nearby civilian settlements. The target presents himself for approximately 3 to 4 minutes each morning, General Harrison explained, pointing to high-resolution photographs of the compound. He maintains a consistent routine, appearing on the eastern balcony between 05:30 and 05:35 local time. After that window, he doesn't emerge again until the following day. Admiral Mitchell studied the tactical overview, his mind immediately turning to the shooting demonstration he had witnessed at FOB Shank. The distance from the nearest feasible shooting position to the target balcony was calculated at 3,247 meters, far beyond the effective range of conventional military snipers, but potentially within the capabilities of an extraordinary marksman. "Sir," Admiral Mitchell interjected, "what's the maximum distance from which we could establish an effective shooting position?" Colonel Davidson, the intelligence officer leading the briefing, consulted his notes. The closest concealed position with a clear line of sight would be Ridge Point Alpha, approximately 3,200 meters from the target. It's accessible via helicopter insertion, but the shot would be at the extreme limits of human capability. Admiral Mitchell felt a surge of excitement. The parameters of this mission seemed almost custom-designed for Staff Sergeant Santos's unique abilities. A shot at 3,200 meters would establish a new record for confirmed sniper kills, but more importantly, it represented the only viable option for eliminating a high-value target who was causing significant American casualties. "General," Admiral Mitchell said carefully, "I may have a solution to consider. I recently observed a sniper demonstration that suggests such a shot might be possible under the right conditions." The room fell silent as all eyes turned to Admiral Mitchell. Long-range sniping at distances exceeding 3,000 meters was largely theoretical. Few military snipers had ever attempted such shots in combat conditions, and fewer still had succeeded. "Explain," General Harrison ordered. Admiral Mitchell described the demonstration at FOB Shank, emphasizing Santos's technical precision and the seemingly impossible accuracy she had displayed. He carefully avoided exaggerating her capabilities while making clear that he had witnessed shooting skills beyond anything in his previous experience. A shot at 3,200 meters would be at the absolute limits of physics and human capability, Colonel Davidson observed. Bullet flight time would exceed 7 seconds, drop would be approximately 60 feet, and environmental factors would be multiplied exponentially. "Which is precisely why al-Rashid considers himself safe," Admiral Mitchell replied. "He's positioned his compound at a distance he believes no sniper could effectively engage. That overconfidence could be his weakness." General Harrison leaned back in his chair, considering the proposal. The mission carried enormous risks. Failure would alert al-Rashid to American capabilities and likely cause him to alter his security procedures permanently. Success, however, would eliminate one of the most dangerous enemy commanders in the region and demonstrate American reach to other high-value targets. I want to meet this sniper, General Harrison decided. If we're going to attempt something this ambitious, I need to understand her capabilities personally. 2 days later, Staff Sergeant Santos found herself on AC-130 transport aircraft bound for Bagram Airfield, accompanied by her spotter Corporal Rodriguez and her meticulously maintained Barrett M107. She had been given only the most general briefing about her mission, a high-priority target elimination requiring extreme long-range precision shooting. During the flight, Santos used the time to study ballistics tables and environmental data for the mountainous region where she would be operating. The elevation and temperature variations in the Hindu Kush presented challenges she had never encountered in the desert environment of FOB Shank. Air density at 9,000 feet would significantly affect bullet trajectory, while unpredictable mountain winds could make accurate shooting nearly impossible. Upon arrival at Bagram, Santos was immediately escorted to the secure briefing facility where Admiral Mitchell waited with General Harrison and the mission planning team. The gravity of the situation became clear as classified intelligence photos were spread across the conference table. Sergeant Santos, General Harrison began, you've been brought here because Admiral Mitchell believes you possess shooting capabilities that could make an impossible mission possible. I need you to understand the stakes. This target has been responsible for killing dozens of American soldiers, and conventional tactics cannot reach him. Santos studied the photographs and tactical diagrams with intense concentration. The distance calculations, elevation changes, and environmental factors presented a shooting challenge beyond anything she had previously attempted. The margin for error was essentially non-existent. A miss would not only fail to eliminate the target, but would also reveal American capabilities and compromise future operations. Sir, Santos said after several minutes of careful analysis, the shot is technically feasible, but success would depend on optimal conditions and extensive preparation. I would need detailed meteorological data, precise distance measurements, and the ability to study the target area for several days before attempting engagement. Admiral Mitchell felt a surge of confidence. Santos wasn't boasting about her abilities or guaranteeing success. She was providing a realistic professional assessment that acknowledged both the possibilities and the risks. What equipment modifications would you require? Asked Colonel Davidson. Santos considered this carefully. The Barrett M107 has the necessary power and accuracy for extreme long-range shooting, but I would need specialized ammunition, match-grade rounds with consistent ballistic performance. I would also require an upgraded scope with enhanced magnification and a laser rangefinder capable of precise measurements at extended distances. General Harrison nodded approvingly. Santos was thinking like a professional, not a glory-seeking soldier eager for recognition. Her requests were practical and demonstrated understanding of the technical requirements for the mission. Timeline, the general asked. I would need a minimum of 5 days for preparation and reconnaissance, Santos replied. 3 days to study the target area and environmental patterns, 1 day for equipment verification and test firing, and 1 day for final mission preparation. Attempting the shot without adequate preparation would significantly reduce the probability of success. The briefing continued for 3 hours as Santos reviewed every aspect of the proposed mission. She asked detailed questions about weather patterns, elevation profiles, and target behavior that demonstrated her thorough understanding of long-range shooting principles. Her questions were those of a consummate professional who left nothing to chance. That evening, Admiral Mitchell found Santos on the base firing range, working with the specialized equipment that had been procured for the mission. The new scope was a Schmidt and Bender 5-45x56 PM2, the finest optic available to military snipers, capable of magnifications that would render targets visible at previously impossible distances. How does it feel? Admiral Mitchell asked as he approached her position. Santos looked up from her scope adjustments, her expression serious. The equipment is excellent, sir, but equipment alone won't ensure success. The shot you're asking me to attempt is at the very edge of what's physically possible. Are you having second thoughts? No, sir, Santos replied firmly. I'm simply being realistic about the challenges. My grandfather always taught me that confidence without respect for difficulty leads to failure. This mission will require everything I've learned, and probably some luck as well. Admiral Mitchell appreciated her honesty. Too many soldiers would have been eager to impress senior officers with bravado, but Santos remained focused on the technical realities of the task ahead. Over the following days, Santos immersed herself in mission preparation with an intensity that impressed even the veteran special operations personnel at Bagram. She studied meteorological reports dating back months, looking for patterns in wind conditions and weather phenomena. She analyzed satellite imagery to understand heat signatures and air currents in the target area. She even consulted with Army meteorologists to understand how mountain terrain would affect atmospheric conditions. The test firing sessions revealed both the potential and the challenges of shooting at extreme distances. At ranges up to 2,000 meters, Santos continued to demonstrate the exceptional accuracy that had brought her to Admiral Mitchell's attention. Beyond that distance, however, the variables multiplied exponentially, and even slight miscalculations could send bullets far from their intended targets. The physics become increasingly unforgiving as distance increases, Santos explained to Rodriguez during one of their preparation sessions. At 3,200 meters, a 1-degree error in wind calculation translates to a miss of several meters. There's no room for approximation. Rodriguez, who had been Santos's spotter for over a year, understood the magnitude of what she was attempting. He had seen her make seemingly impossible shots in combat, but this mission pushed far beyond even her proven capabilities. "What does your gut tell you?" he asked quietly. Santos was silent for a long moment, her dark eyes focused on the distant mountains where their target waited. "It tells me that this is why I've been training my entire life. My grandfather always said that some shots are more than just marksmanship. They're a test of everything you are as a person." The final briefing took place on the evening before the mission. Weather forecasts predicted optimal conditions, clear skies, minimal wind, and stable temperatures. Intelligence confirmed that Al-Rashid was maintaining his routine of morning appearances on the observation balcony. Everything was aligned for the attempt. Sergeant Santos, General Harrison, said, as the briefing concluded, "I want you to understand that there's no shame in calling off this mission if conditions aren't perfect. The shot you're attempting has never been successfully made in combat, and failure won't reflect poorly on your abilities." Santos stood at attention, her rifle case slung across her shoulder. "Sir, I appreciate your concern, but I believe this mission is achievable. If Al-Rashid present a clear target and conditions are favorable, I will take the shot." As Santos left the briefing room, Admiral Mitchell walked beside her toward the helicopter that would transport the team to the insertion point. The weight of the mission pressed heavily on everyone involved, but Santos appeared calm and focused. "Any final thoughts?" Admiral Mitchell asked. Santos paused at the helicopter's door, looking back toward the operations center where dozens of personnel were monitoring intelligence feeds and coordinating the complex mission. "I keep thinking about something my grandfather told me when I was learning to shoot. He said that the hardest part isn't making the shot. It's accepting the responsibility that comes with having the ability to make it." Admiral Mitchell watched as Santos climbed aboard the helicopter, followed by Rodriguez and their mission equipment. As the aircraft lifted off into the Afghan night, carrying them toward the most challenging shot in military history, he found himself reflecting on the remarkable journey that had brought them to this moment. The young sergeant from East Los Angeles was about to attempt something that would either establish her as one of the finest marksmen in military history or demonstrate the limits of human capability. Either way, Admiral Mitchell knew he was witnessing something extraordinary, a test of skill, preparation, and character that would be remembered long after the war ended. The helicopter disappeared into the darkness, carrying Santos toward her appointment with destiny in the mountains of Afghanistan. In less than 12 hours, the world would learn whether human precision could reach across more than 3 kilometers of hostile terrain to eliminate one of America's most dangerous enemy. The UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter cut through the pre-dawn darkness, its rotors beating a steady rhythm as it carried Santos and her team toward the most challenging mission of her military career. Below them, the rugged terrain of the Hindu Kush Mountains stretched endlessly, its peaks and valleys shrouded in morning mist that would soon burn away under the Afghan sun. Santos sat in silence, her Barrett M107 secure beside her, and her mind focused on the countless variables that would determine success or failure in the coming hours. She had spent the flight reviewing her calculations one final time, but now there was nothing left to do except trust in her training and the meticulous preparation that had brought her to this moment. Corporal Rodriguez, her spotter and closest friend, sat across from her checking their communication equipment and range-finding instruments. The bond between sniper and spotter was sacred in their profession, a partnership built on absolute trust and mutual dependence. Rodriguez had never failed to provide accurate range and wind data, and Santos had never missed a target when conditions were favorable. The helicopter began its descent toward Ridge Point Alpha, the rocky outcropping that intelligence analysts had identified as the only viable shooting position within range of al-Rashid's compound. As they approached the landing zone, Santos could see the target area through the aircraft's windows, a forbidding landscape of stone and shadow where their quarry had felt safe for months. The insertion was executed flawlessly, with the Black Hawk touching down just long enough for Santos, Rodriguez, and their security team to unload their equipment before disappearing back into the darkness. Within minutes, the sound of rotor blades had faded, leaving only the whisper of mountain wind and the distant call of nocturnal birds. Santos immediately began establishing her shooting position, using night vision equipment to navigate the rocky terrain. The site they had selected offered an unobstructed view across the valley to al-Rashid's compound, visible in the distance as a cluster of lights against the mountainside. The calculated distance of 3,247 meters seemed almost insurmountable in the darkness, but Santos knew that first light would reveal the target clearly. Working by feel and memory, Santos assembled her Barrett and mounted the specialized Schmidt and Bender scope that would allow her to see her target at impossible distances. Every component had been meticulously checked and rechecked, but she went through the process again, knowing that a single loose screw or misaligned component could doom the mission. Rodriguez established the spotting position beside her, setting up the powerful telescope that would allow him to observe the target and provide crucial information about wind conditions and target behavior. Their communication equipment was tested and verified. They would have direct contact with the command center at Bagram throughout the mission. As the first hints of dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, Santos settled into her final shooting position. She had spent hours the previous day studying this exact spot, learning every contour of the rock, and finding the most stable platform for her rifle. The Barrett was now perfectly aligned, its bipod legs adjusted to provide optimal stability while allowing for minute adjustments. The compound slowly became visible as daylight spread across the valley. Through her high-powered scope, Santos could make out individual buildings and the balcony where intelligence sources had reported al-Rashid's regular appearances. The distance was staggering. The compound appeared as a tiny cluster of structures against the vast mountainside, and the target balcony was barely discernible even through her advanced optics. Wind is light and variable, 2 to 3 miles per hour from the northwest, Rodriguez reported quietly, his voice barely audible even at close range. Temperature is 42 degrees and rising slowly. Humidity is low, visibility unlimited. Santos acknowledged the information with a slight nod, her concentration already entering the meditative state that her grandfather had taught her decades earlier. The world around her began to fade away until there was nothing but the crosshairs, the distant target, and the complex ballistic calculations that would guide her bullet across more than 3 kilometers of hostile terrain. At exactly 0530 hours, movement appeared on the target balcony. Santos felt her heart rate slow as she identified a human figure emerging from the compound's interior. Through her scope, the figure was tiny but clearly visible, a man in traditional Afghan clothing carrying what appeared to be binoculars. Target acquired, Santos whispered into her throat microphone. Adult male, consistent with intelligence photos. Confirmed, came the response from the command center. You are cleared to engage when ready. Santos began her final preparation sequence, a ritual that had become second nature through thousands of hours of training and combat experience. She verified her scope settings, confirmed her ballistic calculations, and assessed the minimal environmental conditions that could affect her shot. The bullet she would fire weighed 750 grains and would leave her rifle at a muzzle velocity of approximately 2,800 feet per second. At 3,247 meters, it would take 6.8 seconds to reach the target, during which time it would drop nearly 80 feet due to gravity and drift several feet due to wind and Coriolis effect. The margin for error was measured in inches. Through her scope, Santos watched al-Rashid move around the balcony, studying the valley below through his binoculars. Intelligence reports had indicated that he typically spent 3 to 4 minutes in this exposed position before retreating into the safety of his compound. Santos would have only one opportunity. A missed shot would alert the target and make future attempts impossible. Range confirmed at 3,247 meters, Rodriguez reported. Wind has shifted slightly, now 3 miles per hour from due north. Target is stationary, facing southeast. Santos made minute adjustments to her scope, compensating for the subtle change in wind conditions. At extreme distances, even small variations in environmental factors could mean the difference between success and failure. Her calculations had to be perfect, and her execution flawless. The target moved to the center of the balcony and stopped, raising his binoculars to scan the valley below. This was the moment Santos had been waiting for. Al-Rashid was stationary, clearly visible, and presenting the optimal target profile. Santos controlled her breathing, slowing her heart rate to minimize any tremor that could affect her aim. Her finger found the trigger, and she began the gradual pressure that would release the shot. Everything she had learned, every hour of training, every lesson from her grandfather converged in this single moment. The world became absolutely still. Santos could feel her heartbeat, sense the minute air currents across her skin, hear the whisper of wind through the rocks. Time seemed suspended as she reached the perfect moment of release. That instant when all variables aligned and human skill transcended normal limitations. The Barrett erupted with its characteristic thunderous roar, the massive muzzle brake directing the blast sideways and creating a cloud of dust around the shooting position. The recoil, even absorbed by the rifle's advanced dampening system, was substantial, but Santos rode it expertly while maintaining visual contact with her target through the scope. The bullet began its 6.8-second journey across the valley, following a precise parabolic arc that would carry it from the rocky outcropping where Santos lay to the distant balcony where al-Rashid stood unaware of his approaching doom. During those eternal seconds, the bullet would travel at speeds exceeding the speed of sound, cutting through air that became progressively thinner as it climbed toward its target. Santos kept her eye to the scope, watching for the impact that would occur long after the sound of her shot had echoed away across the mountains. At such distances, she couldn't see the bullet's flight path, but years of experience had taught her to recognize the subtle signs that indicated a successful shot. Through his spotting scope, Rodriguez maintained visual contact with the target balcony. The powerful telescope allowed him to see details that were invisible to Santos through her rifle scope, and his role now was to confirm the shot's impact and assess the results. Flight time, 4 seconds, 5 seconds, 6 seconds. Rodriguez counted quietly, his voice tense with concentration. At 6.8 seconds after Santos had pulled the trigger, the bullet arrived at its destination with devastating effect. The 750-grain projectile, traveling at approximately 1,400 feet per second after its long journey, struck Al-Rashid's center mass with precision that defied belief. The impact was immediate and decisive. The target dropped instantly, his binoculars clattering across the balcony floor. "Target down!" Rodriguez shouted, his professional composure finally breaking. "Clean hit. Target is down and not moving." Santos allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction before beginning the practiced routine of safing her weapon and preparing for immediate evacuation. The shot had been successful, but their mission was far from over. The sound of the Barrett would have alerted every Taliban fighter in the valley, and their position would soon come under intense scrutiny. "Outstanding shot, Sergeant Santos," came the voice from the command center. "Confirmed target elimination at 3247 meters. Extraction team is en route to your position." As Santos carefully packed her equipment, she reflected on the shot that would define her military career. The distance exceeded any confirmed sniper kill in military history, but more importantly, it had eliminated a dangerous enemy who had been responsible for countless American casualties. Her grandfather's lessons about responsibility and precision had guided her to this moment. The extraction helicopter arrived within 30 minutes, its crew eager to evacuate the sniper team before Taliban forces could organize a response. As Santos climbed aboard with her precious Barrett, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment tempered by the sobering knowledge that she had taken a human life from an impossible distance. During the flight back to Bagram, Santos sat in silence, processing the magnitude of what she had achieved. Rodriguez sat beside her, grinning broadly and occasionally shaking his head in amazement. The other members of the extraction team looked at her with a mixture of awe and respect that made her uncomfortable. "How do you feel?" Rodriguez asked quietly, his voice barely audible over the helicopter's engines. Santos considered the question carefully before responding. "I feel like I did what needed to be done. My grandfather always said that a sniper's job isn't to feel good about shooting. It's to be ready when the shot matters most." As Bagram Airfield came into view, Santos could see Admiral Mitchell waiting on the landing pad along with General Harrison and several other senior officers. The news of her successful shot had already spread throughout the command structure, and she knew that her life was about to change dramatically. The helicopter touched down, and Santos emerged carrying her rifle case and equipment bag. Admiral Mitchell approached her immediately, his expression mixing professional satisfaction with personal pride. "Congratulations, Sergeant Santos," he said formally. "You've just made military history." Santos came to attention, but Admiral Mitchell gestured for her to relax. "Sir, I was just doing my job." The target presented himself, conditions were favorable, and the shot was there to be taken. General Harrison joined them, his weathered face showing the satisfaction of a commander whose impossible mission had been accomplished through extraordinary skill and preparation. "Sergeant, you've eliminated one of our most dangerous enemies and demonstrated capabilities that will have strategic implications for future operations." As they walked toward the operations center for the post-mission debriefing, Santos found herself thinking about the journey that had brought her from the streets of East Los Angeles to this moment of triumph in the mountains of Afghanistan. Her grandfather's patient instruction, years of training, and an unwavering commitment to excellence had culminated in a shot that would be studied and discussed for decades to come. The debriefing lasted several hours as intelligence analysts confirmed the target's identity and assessed the tactical implications of the mission's success. Santos answered countless questions about her technique, equipment, and the environmental factors that had made the shot possible. Her responses were precise and professional, befitting a soldier who understood the significance of what she had achieved. As the day wore on, Santos began to understand that her life had been fundamentally altered by a single pull of the trigger. The shot at 3,247 meters had not only eliminated a dangerous enemy, but had also established her as the premier long-range marksman in military history. The responsibilities and opportunities that would follow were both exciting and daunting. That evening, as Santos cleaned her Barrett in the quiet of her temporary quarters, she thought about calling her grandfather to share the news of her achievement. Then, she remembered his words about the weight of taking a life, even in war, and decided that some victories were better honored in silence. The legend of Maria Santos, the sniper who could reach across impossible distances to touch her enemies, was now written in the official records of military history. But for Santos herself, the shot was simply another step in a journey that had begun with an 8-year-old girl learning to shoot tin cans in the California desert under her grandfather's patient guidance 6 months after the historic shot that eliminated Hakeem al-Rashid. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos found herself in circumstances she had never imagined. The quiet sniper, who had preferred to remain anonymous, was now the subject of classified briefings at the Pentagon. Her techniques were being studied at military academies, and her name was whispered with reverence among special operations communities worldwide. Admiral Mitchell had become her unofficial mentor and advocate, recognizing that Santos possessed capabilities that could revolutionize military sniping doctrine. He had spent considerable political capital ensuring that her achievements received appropriate recognition, while protecting her from the publicity that could compromise her effectiveness in future operations. The transformation began with a phone call that arrived at Forward Operating Base Shank on a humid Tuesday morning in August. Santos was conducting routine marksmanship training when her commanding officer, Colonel Peterson, summoned her to his office with unusual urgency. "Santos, I've just received orders from the Pentagon," Colonel Peterson said, gesturing for her to sit down. "You're being transferred to a special assignment that will take you away from Afghanistan indefinitely." Santos felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Her life in Afghanistan had become routine, dangerous but predictable. The prospect of change, especially originating from the Pentagon, suggested that her record-breaking shot had attracted attention at the highest levels of military command. "What kind of assignment, sir?" "You're being assigned to the United States Army Marksmanship Unit at Fort Benning," Colonel Peterson explained. "Your primary responsibilities will include developing advanced sniper training curricula, testing new equipment, and possibly training other elite marksmen. Admiral Mitchell specifically requested your assignment to this program." Santos had heard of the Army Marksmanship Unit, an elite organization responsible for developing shooting doctrine and training the military's finest marksmen. Assignment to AMU was considered one of the highest honors available to military shooters, typically reserved for soldiers with decades of experience and multiple combat deployments. "Sir, I appreciate the honor, but I feel my place is here with my unit," Santos replied. "There's still important work to be done in Afghanistan." Colonel Peterson smiled knowingly. "Sergeant, this isn't a request you can decline. The shot you made against al-Rashid has created opportunities that extend far beyond individual combat operations. Your techniques and knowledge could benefit thousands of soldiers if properly applied to training and doctrine development. The transition from combat operations in Afghanistan to the academic environment of Fort Benning proved more challenging than Santos had anticipated. After 18 months of constant alertness and life-or-death missions, the structured environment of the Army Marksmanship Unit felt almost surreal in its normalcy. Her first assignment was to work with ballistics experts in developing training protocols for extreme long-range shooting. The technical aspects fascinated her, translating the intuitive knowledge she had developed through experience into systematic instruction that could be taught to other snipers. Dr. Elizabeth Warren, a civilian ballistics expert with 30 years of experience in military research, became Santos's primary collaborator. Dr. Warren had spent decades studying the theoretical limits of human marksmanship, but she had never worked with a shooter who had actually achieved what Santos had accomplished. Your shot at 3247 meters shouldn't have been possible, Dr. Warren explained during one of their early meetings. The ballistic calculations suggest that environmental variables at that distance would make accurate shooting nearly impossible, yet you achieved a perfect hit on your first attempt. Santos found herself struggling to explain techniques that had become instinctive through years of practice. It's not just about calculations, she said, trying to put her grandfather's teachings into academic terms. You have to understand the environment as a living thing. Feel how the air moves, sense the subtle changes in atmospheric pressure, read the signs that tell you when conditions are optimal. Dr. Warren was fascinated by Santos's approach, which combined precise technical knowledge with an almost mystical understanding of environmental factors. Traditional sniper training emphasized mechanical precision and mathematical calculations, but Santos operated on a level that transcended pure technique. Their collaboration produced the first systematic analysis of extreme long-range shooting factors, a classified manual that would become the foundation for advanced sniper training throughout the military. Santos's insights into environmental reading, ballistic compensation, and psychological preparation were codified into teachable principles for the first time. Meanwhile, Admiral Mitchell was working behind the scenes to ensure that Santos received appropriate recognition for her achievements. The military awards system was notoriously slow and bureaucratic, but Mitchell's influence helped expedite the process that would culminate in formal acknowledgement of her extraordinary service. The Bronze Star Medal with Valor device was presented to Santos in a ceremony at Fort Benning, attended by General Harrison, Admiral Mitchell, and dozens of other military dignitaries. The citation read simply, "For exceptional valor and professional skill in eliminating a high-value enemy target under extraordinary circumstances, directly contributing to the success of combat operations and the safety of American personnel." Santos stood at attention as the medal was pinned to her uniform, but her thoughts were elsewhere. She thought about her grandfather, who had passed away 2 months earlier without ever learning about her record-breaking shot. He had taught her that true marksmanship was about more than hitting targets. It was about understanding responsibility, respecting life, and using exceptional skills only when absolutely necessary. After the ceremony, Admiral Mitchell approached her with a proposal that would change her life once again. "Santos, I have an opportunity that might interest you. The Navy SEALs are developing a new long-range reconnaissance program, and they need an instructor who understands extreme distance shooting. The position would involve training the finest special operations personnel in advanced marksmanship techniques." The offer was extraordinary. Very few Army personnel were ever invited to train Navy SEALs, and the opportunity to work with the military's most elite units was unprecedented for someone of Santos's rank and experience. However, accepting would mean leaving the Army and transferring to the Navy, a career change that would alter her entire military trajectory. "Sir, I'm honored by the offer, but I need time to consider the implications," Santos replied. Admiral Mitchell nodded understandingly. "Take all the time you need. This is a decision that will affect the rest of your career, and it shouldn't be made lightly." That evening, Santos walked the grounds of Fort Benning, reflecting on the choices before her. Her life had been transformed by a single shot fired across a valley in Afghanistan, and now she faced decisions that would determine how she used the recognition and opportunities that had followed. She thought about Corporal Rodriguez, still serving in Afghanistan, and the other members of her unit who continued to face daily dangers while she worked in the relative safety of a training facility. Part of her felt guilty about leaving combat operations, even though her new role potentially had greater strategic impact. The next morning brought unexpected news that would influence her decision. Dr. Warren informed her that their research had attracted attention from the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, the Pentagon's cutting-edge technology development organization. DARPA was interested in funding a comprehensive study of human marksmanship limits, with Santos as the primary test subject and consultant. "They want to understand how you achieved what you did, Dr." Warren explained excitedly. The research could lead to revolutionary advances in sniper training, equipment design, and ballistic science. You would essentially become the template for developing the next generation of elite marksmen. Santos realized that her unique combination of practical experience and documented achievement had created opportunities she had never imagined. The choice between returning to combat operations, training Navy SEALs, or participating in advanced research would determine not only her career path, but also her potential contribution to military effectiveness. Admiral Mitchell arranged a private meeting to discuss the various options and their implications. They met in his temporary office at Fort Benning, surrounded by maps and intelligence briefings that reminded Santos of their first encounter in Afghanistan. "I want you to understand the broader picture," Admiral Mitchell began. "Your shot against al-Rashid was more than just an isolated achievement. It demonstrated capabilities that could change how we approach certain types of military operations. The question is how you want to apply those capabilities going forward." Santos appreciated his directness. Throughout her career, Admiral Mitchell had been honest about both opportunities and challenges, never sugarcoating difficult realities or making promises he couldn't keep. "Sir, what do you think would be the most beneficial use of my skills and experience?" Admiral Mitchell considered the question carefully. From a purely military perspective, the DARPA research program offers the greatest potential long-term impact. Your techniques and insights could benefit thousands of soldiers over decades. However, I also understand the appeal of direct operational involvement, whether through SEAL training or returning to combat operations. They discussed each option in detail, analyzing the potential benefits and drawbacks of different career paths. Admiral Mitchell emphasized that any choice would have his full support, but he wanted Santos to understand the strategic implications of her decision. "There's one more factor to consider," Admiral Mitchell said as their meeting concluded. "Your grandfather's influence on your development as a marksman. What do you think he would want you to do with the skills he helped you develop?" Santos knew the answer immediately. Her grandfather had always emphasized that exceptional abilities carried exceptional responsibilities. He would want her to use her skills in whatever way would do the most good for the most people, regardless of personal preferences or career advancement. That night, Santos called her mother in Los Angeles to discuss the decision she faced. It was their first conversation since her grandfather's funeral, and Santos found herself sharing details about her military service that she had previously kept private. "Mija," her mother said in Spanish, "your abuelo always knew you were special. He used to tell me that God had given you a gift, but that the gift would require sacrifices. Whatever you choose, make sure it honors his memory and helps other people." The conversation reinforced what Santos already knew in her heart. Her extraordinary shooting abilities were not just personal achievements, but tools that could serve a greater purpose. The question was how to use them most effectively. The next morning, Santos requested a meeting with Admiral Mitchell to announce her decision. She had spent the entire night thinking about her grandfather's teachings, her responsibilities as a soldier, and the opportunities that lay before her. "Sir," she said as they sat down in his office, "I've decided to accept the position with the Navy SEAL training program. I believe that training elite operators in advanced marksmanship techniques will have the greatest immediate impact on military effectiveness." Admiral Mitchell smiled approvingly. "I think you've made an excellent choice. The SEALs will benefit enormously from your expertise, and you'll have the opportunity to work with some of the finest military personnel in the world." Santos felt a sense of relief and anticipation as her decision was finalized. The transfer process would take several months, during which she would complete her work at Fort Benning and prepare for her new role as an instructor to the Navy's most elite units. As she walked across the Fort Benning parade ground that afternoon, Santos reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought her from the streets of East Los Angeles to this moment of opportunity and responsibility. Her grandfather's patient instruction had planted the seeds of excellence that had grown into capabilities beyond anything either of them had imagined. The young woman who had learned to shoot tin cans in the California desert was now preparing to train the most elite soldiers in the world, carrying forward a tradition of marksmanship excellence that honored both her heritage and her adopted military family. The legend of Maria Santos was still being written, and the most significant chapters lay ahead with years after her record-breaking shot in Afghanistan. Petty Officer First Class Maria Santos stood before a class of 12 Navy SEALs at the Advanced Marksmanship Training Center in Quantico, Virginia. Her transition from Army Sergeant to Navy Petty Officer had been unprecedented in military history, reflecting the unique value placed on her extraordinary skills and knowledge. The SEALs seated before her represented the pinnacle of military training, operators with years of combat experience, multiple deployments, and proven abilities in the most demanding special operations environments. Yet they looked at Santos with the respectful attention reserved for instructors who possessed knowledge they needed to master. Admiral Mitchell, now promoted to his current rank and serving as Director of Special Operations Training, observed from the back of the classroom. He had personally overseen Santos's integration into the Navy's elite training establishment, ensuring that her unique talents were properly utilized while protecting her from the bureaucratic obstacles that could have hindered her effectiveness. Extreme long-range shooting is not about superior equipment or mathematical precision alone, Santos began, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had developed through months of instructing the military's finest personnel. Success at distances beyond 2,000 meters requires an understanding of environmental factors that most snipers never encounter in conventional operations. The SEAL students listened intently as Santos described the techniques she had developed through trial, error, and ultimately triumph in the mountains of Afghanistan. Her instruction went far beyond traditional marksmanship training, incorporating lessons about atmospheric reading, psychological preparation, and the intuitive knowledge that separated good snipers from legendary ones. Chief Petty Officer Michael Thompson, a veteran SEAL sniper with 4 combat deployments, raised his hand with a question. Petty Officer Santos, how do you maintain accuracy when environmental factors become too complex for standard ballistic calculations? Santos smiled slightly, remembering similar questions from her grandfather when she was learning to shoot as a child. Chief, there comes a point where you have to trust your instincts more than your instruments. Your body and brain process thousands of environmental cues that can't be quantified by computers. Learning to recognize and interpret those cues is what separates exceptional shooting from merely competent shooting. The training program Santos had developed combined traditional military instruction with innovative techniques based on her unique experiences. Students learned not only the mechanics of extreme-range shooting, but also the mental disciplines required to perform under extraordinary pressure. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell, Admiral Mitchell's daughter, and one of the few female SEAL officers, was particularly interested in Santos's approach to psychological preparation. How do you maintain focus during the extended periods required for extreme-range shots? Mental conditioning is as important as physical technique, Santos replied. I learned meditation and breathing techniques that allow me to maintain concentration for extended periods while remaining aware of changing environmental conditions. It's a balance between intense focus and relaxed awareness that takes years to develop. The classroom portion of the training was supplemented by practical exercises on ranges that had been specially constructed to accommodate extreme distance shooting. Santos worked with each student individually, analyzing their techniques and providing personalized instruction based on their existing skills and experience. During one such training session, Santos demonstrated the principles she taught by engaging targets at distances up to 2,800 meters. Her shots were consistently accurate, but more importantly, she was able to explain the reasoning behind each adjustment and decision in terms that her students could understand and apply. Admiral Mitchell watched these demonstrations with continued amazement at Santos's abilities. Even after 2 years of working together, he was consistently impressed by her combination of technical skill and teaching ability. She had proven to be not only an exceptional shooter, but also an exceptional instructor. "Your students are making remarkable progress," Admiral Mitchell commented after observing a particularly successful training session. "Some of them are achieving shots they never would have attempted before your instruction." Santos nodded with satisfaction. They already possessed the basic skills and mental toughness required for this type of shooting. My job is simply to help them understand how to apply those skills at extended ranges and under challenging conditions. The success of Santos's training program had attracted attention throughout the special operations community. Requests for her instruction came from Army Special Forces, Marine Force Recon, and even allied military units from friendly nations. Her techniques were being studied and incorporated into sniper training curricula worldwide. However, Santos's greatest satisfaction came from letters and reports she received from former students who had successfully applied their training in combat operations. Chief Thompson had used her techniques to eliminate 3 high-value targets during a mission in Syria, while Lieutenant Commander Mitchell had successfully conducted reconnaissance operations that were impossible using conventional sniper capabilities. The impact of Santos's work extended beyond individual achievements to strategic military capabilities. The ability to engage targets at extreme ranges was changing how certain operations were planned and executed, providing commanders with options that had not existed before her techniques became available. Dr. Elizabeth Warren, who continued to collaborate with Santos on ballistics research, published a groundbreaking paper on human marksmanship limits that referenced Santos's achievements. The research suggested that human shooting capabilities were significantly greater than previously believed, with proper training and environmental understanding enabling accuracy at distances thought to be impossible. "Maria has redefined what we consider possible in terms of human marksmanship," Dr. Warren explained during a conference presentation. "Her techniques and insights have pushed the boundaries of ballistic science and military training in ways that will have lasting impact on both fields." The recognition of Santos's contributions culminated in her selection for promotion to Chief Petty Officer, an advancement that typically required many more years of service. The promotion ceremony was attended by Admiral Mitchell, General Harrison, and other senior officers who had been involved in her career development. "Chief Santos," Admiral Mitchell said during the ceremony, "your achievements represent the finest traditions of military service, excellence in execution, innovation in technique, and dedication to training the next generation of warriors. The Navy is proud to have you in our ranks." As Santos accepted her new rank insignia, she reflected on the journey that had brought her from a young Army sergeant in Afghanistan to a senior Navy instructor responsible for training elite special operations personnel. The path had been unexpected and sometimes challenging, but it had allowed her to honor her grandfather's memory while serving her country at the highest level. The ceremony was followed by a reception where Santos had the opportunity to reconnect with former students, colleagues from her Army service, and the civilian researchers who had helped document her techniques. Corporal Rodriguez, now Sergeant Rodriguez, had flown in from his current assignment to attend the promotion ceremony. "I still can't believe how far you've come," Rodriguez said as they talked privately during the reception. "When we were lying in that rocky hide in Afghanistan, I never imagined that shot would lead to all this." Santos smiled at her former spotter and longtime friend. "Neither did I. Sometimes I think about how different things would be if I had missed that day, or if Admiral Mitchell had never visited our base. It's amazing how single moments can change everything." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a young Navy lieutenant who approached Santos nervously. "Chief Santos, I'm Lieutenant Jessica Martinez. I'm scheduled to begin your advanced marksmanship course next month, and I wanted to introduce myself." Santos studied the young officer, seeing something familiar in her eager expression and obvious dedication. "Lieutenant, what's your background in marksmanship?" "I grew up hunting with my father in Colorado, and I was the top graduate from sniper school last year," Lieutenant Martinez replied. "I've read everything available about your techniques, and I'm hoping to learn enough to make a real contribution to special operations." Santos recognized the hunger for knowledge and excellence that had driven her own development as a marksman. Lieutenant, the most important thing you can bring to the training is an open mind and willingness to challenge your assumptions about what's possible. If you have those qualities, we can work with everything else. As the evening continued, Santos found herself in conversation with Admiral Mitchell about the future of extreme-range marksmanship training and its role in military operations. The program had exceeded all expectations, producing a new generation of snipers capable of operations that had been impossible before Santos's innovations. "What's next for you, Chief?" Admiral Mitchell asked as the reception wound down. Santos considered the question carefully. She had achieved more in her military career than she had ever imagined possible, but she also felt a responsibility to continue pushing the boundaries of what could be accomplished in her field. "I'd like to expand the training program to include more international students," she replied. "Allied nations face many of the same challenges we do, and sharing these techniques could strengthen our collective security capabilities. I'd also like to continue the research work with Dr. Warren. There's still a lot we don't understand about human marksmanship potential." Admiral Mitchell nodded approvingly. "Both of those objectives align perfectly with our strategic goals. I think we can make arrangements to support expanded training opportunities and continued research collaboration." As Santos drove home that evening, she thought about calling her mother to share news of her promotion. Her family had been proud of her military service, but they didn't fully understand the technical aspects of her achievements or their significance to military operations. Instead, she found herself thinking about her grandfather and the lessons he had taught her during those long afternoons in the California desert. His patient instruction had planted the seeds of excellence that had grown into capabilities neither of them could have imagined. But his most important teachings had been about responsibility, humility, and using exceptional abilities in service of others. The young girl who had learned to shoot tin cans had become a chief petty officer responsible for training the military's most elite personnel, but the core values her grandfather had instilled remained unchanged. Excellence was not about personal recognition, but about using one's abilities to serve a purpose greater than oneself. The next morning, Santos reported to her office at the Advanced Marksmanship Training Center, ready to begin another day of pushing the boundaries of human capability while honoring the traditions of service that had guided her remarkable journey. Her story had evolved from personal achievement to institutional impact, but the most important chapters still lay ahead. On her desk lay a folder containing applications from the next class of students, each representing a military professional eager to learn techniques that could save lives and accomplish impossible missions. Among them was Lieutenant Martinez's application, along with requests from special operations personnel from 12 different nations. Santos opened the folder and began reviewing the applications, planning how to tailor her instruction to meet each student's needs and capabilities. Some would become exceptional long-range marksmen, while others would return to their units with improved skills and renewed appreciation for the art of precision shooting. All of them would carry forward the legacy of excellence that began with an 8-year-old girl learning to shoot under her grandfather's patient guidance and culminated in a shot fired across an Afghan valley that changed military history. The legend of Maria Santos would live on in the achievements of every student she trained and every mission they accomplished using the techniques she had developed. As Santos began planning the next training cycle, she smiled slightly, hearing her grandfather's voice in her memory. "Mija, remember that the greatest shot is always the one that protects life rather than takes it. Use your abilities wisely, and they will serve you and others well." The wisdom of those words had guided her throughout her remarkable career, and they would continue to influence her work as she trained the next generation of elite marksmen. Chief Petty Officer Maria Santos, formerly Staff Sergeant Santos of the United States Army, had found her true calling not just as an exceptional shooter, but as a teacher who could pass on the knowledge and values that made such exceptional shooting possible. The desert training ground, where Admiral Mitchell first witnessed her strip down an M107 and Learn about her perfect 2,800-meter shot seemed like a lifetime ago, but it had been the beginning of a legacy that would impact military operations for generations to come.